Alright, welcome back. This is now part 2 of our series on ancient Greece, and in this lecture we're going to be talking about the Greco-Persian Wars. So, we established in our last talk about how all of these people would have thought of themselves as Greeks, and there's a shared identity in that. Their ultimate loyalty might have been to their city-state, so they might have thought of themselves more as Athenians or Spartans or Macedonians or whatever, but they did have things that tied together their Greek identity, and that would be their mythology, their language, obviously, their participation in the Olympic Games, certain aesthetic styles that they seem to have shared in common. But encroaching from the east is an entity that we've talked about before, and that's the Persian Empire. So we see the Persian Empire, which starts as this little kingdom, Persepolis, Persia City, in what today would be Iran, has expanded its borders to the west, to the north, to the east, and it's conquered places all the way up to India. They've conquered the Egyptians, they've conquered the Levant, Babylon, all of those sorts of things. And you'll notice that even under King Cyrus the Great, who is, he's really the first guy that gets the ball of the Persian Empire rolling. Even under him, we see this green pushing west far enough that it has included the conquest of some Greek city-states. We call these the Ionian Greeks, that live on the western coast of Asia Minor, what we would today call Turkey. Really, this would be the eastern frontier of anything that we've thought of as Greece before. And then under King Darius, it's going to go even further. So what is the ultimate event that winds up starting this war? Because at first, the way that the Persians roll into these Ionian Greek cities is similar to the things that they've done before. You'd have an emissary, an ambassador who comes in and says, hey, you guys, we love what you're doing here. Just give us a handful of dirt and a cupful of water as a symbol of your ultimate loyalty to the Persian king. So, you can keep being the king of Ephesus or the king of Miletus, but Cyrus will wind up being your king, the king of kings. And, you need to give us a monthly tax that you're going to have to pay, and then you also need to contribute soldiers, your heavy infantry, the hoplites, the phalanx formation that you have. We love that. We'd love to incorporate that into our military. And so, just bow the knee. Your king can continue to be our king. There's a problem, is that the Greeks, these city-states don't really have kings at this point. Remember that a lot of Greek city-states, not that they all have an identical political or social formation, but they are democracies. And so they find the idea of a king to be kind of foreign or Eastern, or just like, I guess barbaric is not the right word, but definitely not Greek. It definitely doesn't feel like something that a true Greek city would do. And I don't know if compromise is the right word, because this is really a decision that's made by the Persians, is that instead of having their democracies, the Persian satrap will appoint an ethnically Greek-speaking tyrant. And so this leader would function kind of as the king of, let's say, Ephesus or Miletus or these different Ionian towns. The Democratic Assembly could still assemble, and they could still confer and basically make recommendations, but the tyrant would have ultimate sway over the direction of the decisions that are to be made. And he would answer to the satrap, and the satrap, who is Persian, would answer to King Cyrus. Again, the deal is you can still keep your own language, you can keep your own gods, but all we need is these tokens of fealty, these tokens of loyalty and submission to Persia. And so this happens all the way back under Cyrus. And for about 40 years, these Ionian Greeks just live under tyrants, and they're not necessarily thrilled about it, but it doesn't really look like they have a lot of great options, because the Persians have not been defeated militarily. If you say no to the Persians, you're not just going to be fighting the Persians. You're going to be fighting all of their nations that are part of their empire, which would include the Phoenicians and the Egyptians and the Babylonians, and just everybody. They could pull from all over their empire and focus their wrath on you. Remember, this is like an ultimatum. They say, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. And to the Greeks, who really value, for at least the citizens to be able to be self-determining, and they value this kind of decentralization of power, as you see throughout the different Greek city-states. They're not thrilled about this, but they kind of don't feel like they have another choice. And it's around the year 500 BC that the Athenians, who are from further west, you'll see that they're kind of on this western peninsula that we call the Balkan, or just like maybe mainland Greece is what we can call that. The Athenians wind up going to the Ionian Greeks and saying, "What are you doing? Like, you're not living the way that free Greek men ought to live. You're living under submission. You're living under subjugation. Sure, the tyrant who rules over you is a Greek guy, but he's not really calling the shots now, is he? He's answering to the satrap, and the satrap is answering to the king of Persia. So you need to rise up, and we will even give you help. We'll give you funds. We'll give you troops. We will support you because you're Greeks. You should not be living under tyranny. You should not be living under a tyrant. You should be, ruling yourselves as all true free men, free Greeks do." And so the Athenians and also the Eritreans, who are from this western peninsula, they go to Ionia and they sponsor and help they sponsor the Ionian revolt against Persian authority, against their tyrant. And ultimately they contribute troops, they contribute, everything that the Ionians need, and they're able to push back the Persians, push them out, and kind of reconquer or reclaim their old system of governance, defeat their tyrant. But it's kind of short-lived because not long after this, not Cyrus, now we're at Darius. King Darius comes in with his Persians, and he just decimates the place. He absolutely, I'm not saying that he burns the cities to the ground or anything, but he does not take this lying down. Basically, this is, if I don't deal with this, if I don't deal with these frisky Ionian Greeks, it's going to set a precedent that other peoples, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, whoever else, that these people will also be able to revolt if they want. And that's not something that I can tolerate. So they go over and they defeat and reconquer and resubjugate the Ephesians, all the Ionian Greeks. But there's not really time at this point to go all the way over to Athens and to also make an example out of them. But what Darius does is he assigns one of his servants at every dinner time. This servant is supposed to come to him and say, "Master, do not forget about the Athenians." And he doesn't forget. He's patient. He has a whole empire that he needs to run, but he does not forget. He amasses his military, and about 10 years later, 490 BC, he winds up sending his fleet to attack Athens, and this is where we get the Battle of Marathon from. So he sends the Persian fleet, about 25,000 troops, and all of these trireme ships. They called triremes because they have 3 rows of oarsmen that are rowing the boats. But he sends these triremes over to not Athens, because Athens is inland, so you can't necessarily land your fleet there. You have to pick somewhere else to land your fleet, but he lands them at the plains of Marathon. And the Athenians muster all the troops that they can. It's only about 11,000, so they're outnumbered more than 2 to 1 here. And they wind up marching their army out to the plains of Marathon. And when they leave the city, they tell the priestesses and the priestesses of Athena, and then the women of the city, "Hey, if we're defeated and the Persians get here and they've killed us, they've defeated us, then you need to kill yourselves, because we don't want them taking you captive." And the women are in. They're sold on this. They're like, "Yeah, we're not going to live as slaves. We're not going to live as subjugated, conquered people. So if we see the Persians approaching, then we will know that you've been defeated, and we'll kill ourselves." So the Athenians go to the plains of Marathon, and they're kind of stationed on the top of this hill, this mountain. Not really a mountain, more of a hill. But the Persians know, okay, we have them outnumbered more than 2 to 1. However, and we have this, these 1,000 horsemen, which are, pretty formidable. But we know that the horses aren't going to be able to charge up this, rocky hill slope. And also them having the high ground is going to give them an advantage. So they wait. They don't actually attack each other right away. They just wait there for several days. And then eventually the Persians decide, hey, you know what? The army's tied down here. Why don't we split our troops in half? Half of them will stay here, and then the other half will just sail around to another place that we can land, and then we'll march from there to Athens. So they split their army and their fleet in half. Half of the fleet leaves, half of them stay, and the Athenians are like, oh no, you're like, what are we going to do, basically? If the Persians get there, then all the women of the city are going to kill themselves. And so, in kind of what's kind of an unprecedented move, the Athenian soldiers wind up, moving down the hill, and then when they, the hoplites have 88 pounds of equipment, and they're pretty slow moving. But then once they get into the 100-yard range of the Persian troops, where the Persian archers can begin firing on them, they actually run that last 100 yards. So imagine an entire football field of all-out running with 88 pounds of gear on. So that's quite the feat. And then that's not, you haven't even started fighting. That's just the warm-up. And then you fight. So they charge up to these ships. They charge up to where the Persian army has landed, and they fight, and they're victorious over the Persian fleet. According to Herodotus, the numbers are that 6,000 of the Persians are killed, only 192 of the Athenians are killed. And, he's a Greek that's writing this story, so he might be embellishing, and we'll come up upon that, throughout this war and throughout even, some other historical facts, some other historical claims, maybe I should say. But the Greeks charge up to the Persians. They engage them in combat. They defeat them in combat. But there's still a problem. They've won this victory. However, half of the Persian fleet is not even there. The remainder of the Persians that were there at Marathon are now fleeing, and the other half of them that had left before the battle are sailing to land somewhere else and then to march on Athens. And so they send back one of their runners to run as fast as he can the entire distance between Marathon and Athens, to let them know, like, hey, the Persians are about to show up, but don't think that means that we've lost. We actually won victory. So this runner, after an all-out run with 88 pounds of gear for 100 yards and an entire battle of combat, he runs as fast as he can the entire distance, 26.2 miles, which is why that's what a marathon is today, back to the city of Athens. And apparently he gave it all that he had, because he gets there, he utters one word, which is Nike, which is the Greek word for victory, and then he collapses dead. And the people are able to understand, okay, we might see the Persians show up soon, but that doesn't mean that our boys have been defeated. We can kind of hold out, and then the Athenians are able to engage the other half of the fleet, defeat them. And as far as King Darius is concerned, this can't go any further right now. Again, we can't allow ourselves to be ultimately defeated, because it sets the precedent that other nations that are contained in our empire will be able to revolt and perhaps secede from our empire. And so he basically decides, okay, I'm not going to engage them right now, but I cannot forget. I've got to get back around to this. And sure enough, there is a attempt at a revolution that does start in Egypt as a result of this defeat. And so Darius has to divert his resources down there to take care of that. And so the Greeks have kind of a pause. Now, during this pause, the Greeks are thinking, hey, this is not over. They're obviously going to come back for us. What do we need to be doing to prepare in the meantime? And so they build up their fleet. They build up their militaries even more so than they already have been. And sure enough, it's another 10 years. But eventually, King Darius winds up dying, and his son Xerxes comes to the throne. And Xerxes wants to avenge his father's loss to the Athenians and just to the Greeks in general. He's like, okay, these Greeks are frisky, they're scrappy, they would be a problem, even just having them on our frontier. Even if we control the Ionians, even if we defeat the Athenians, all of Greece, these people do not think like us, they do not act like us. We have got to subjugate all of them. And so he winds up amassing his forces, all types of forces that he can from all of the nations that the Persian army controls, and he uses these to march his men to Greece. And in what's become kind of famous, he makes this claim, and he tells the Greeks something along the lines of, I'm going to march my entire army over there. And the Greeks are like, hey, dummy, you can't march an army to Greece because there's all this water between us. And Xerxes, to show how spiteful and vindictive and serious he is, he actually converts his navy into a pontoon boat bridge and marches over the water. He marches his army over the Strait of the Dardanelles, into Greece. And while he's going there, he conquers some more of the Greek city-states along the way. He conquers Thrace up in the north, Macedonia up in the north, and eventually he arrives where he's wanting to engage the mainland Greeks in combat. And the first major battle that we're going to have is, and this is 10 years later, this is 480 BC, this is the Battle of Thermopylae, probably the most famous of the battles of the Greco-Persian Wars. The Spartans take the lead in this one. King Leonidas with 300 of his elite guard, and then about 7,000 other Greeks that are with him, wind up going to what's called the Hot Gates, Thermopylae, and they hold the Persians there. So the Persians, depending on the estimates, I think Herodotus says that they have 1 million men, which is very unlikely. That's very likely an exaggeration. But even modern estimates put it between 120,000 and 300,000 men. So even if we take about the midpoint, going down a little bit, 200,000 men, and then 7,000 troops. If we'd say this is about 30 to 1, about 30 Persian troops just for every one of the Greek troops. And but it almost doesn't matter because the narrowness of this pass, because you have the mountains on one side and the Gulf of Malaya on the other side. It's like you're fighting along this sheer cliff. The Persian numbers don't matter. Again, the archers don't matter because they have this giant shield that weighs 18 pounds, and it's bronze, and it's coated in bronze. It's wooden. It's got hide. So the Persian arrows don't do anything. And however many men you have in the Persian military, you can only put so many of them at the front of this battle at a time. And the Spartan elite, and then even the other thousands of Greeks that are engaged there, they're able to just hold the line, and they hold the line for days before before ultimately they wind up being betrayed. But just, a couple things. There's this word that we have in English, we say Laconic. Laconia is the city-state that the capital city, Sparta, would have been a part of, the leader of. And Laconic has come in English to become this word that means very, very pithy, or like these statements that are very harsh and rough and poignant. And so a few examples of this that come from the Spartans are famously, the king, Xerxes, when he sends his emissary to Sparta and they ask for earth and water, those messengers, or some of those messengers, are thrown down a well and said, okay, there's water, there's earth, there you go. And they're thrown down there to die. Another one is you have the Persian king, Xerxes. He shows up and he actually engages King Leonidas in one-on-one conversation. He says, look, you can be the tyrant not just of Laconia, not just of the Ionians, like you can be essentially my satrap over all of Greece. And King Leonidas tells him no. He rejects the offer, and he says, Xerxes says, don't you understand what you're doing? Like, all of the nations that I have, when they come over here, our archers are going to fire so many arrows at you that it's going to blot out the sun. And Leonidas is like, hey, great, we'll be able to fight in the shade. So that's two. And then another one is that when the Persian army eventually does march up to the Greeks, they say, Spartans, lay down your weapons. And then there's this phrase in Greek where the Spartans say molon labe, and you'll see that on shirts of sometimes like a Second Amendment tough guy today, which means come and get them. So the Spartans are tough. They are not going to be pushed around, and they hold the Persians here for days. It's not just them. I shouldn't say that it's just them. It's also thousands of other Greeks, but the Spartans definitely take the lead in their contribution in this fight, and definitely the fame that they get out of this fight. But then there is a Greek trader named Ephialtes who shows the Persians this route up the hill that shepherds typically take in order to bypass the Hot Gates. And so the Persian army is able to actually go around, and now they have the Greeks surrounded. They have them separated from their camp, and the last stand of the 300s of the 300 Spartans, because Leonidas sends the other Greeks away, but the last stand of the 300 Spartans becomes known in history as one of the great last stands, and they ultimately do wind up dying. It's interesting because the Battle of Marathon that we've talked about, and then the other two battles that we'll talk about are Greek victories, and yet neither of them has the fame or the pride of place as the Battle of Thermopylae, which is ultimately a loss for the Spartans. However, they did buy other Greeks enough time that they're able to get out of the city with, their families, most of their valuables. But now that the Persians have penetrated through the hot gates, they wind up marching to Athens and occupying the city of Athens. They burn a lot of the stuff to the ground. The city looks very different after the rebuild than it did before this. But the Persians, even the king Xerxes, he winds up burning the city down and saying, like, okay, I have avenged my father and his loss against the Athenians, but we can't stop here. So he actually leaves, and he puts one of his generals in charge of taking care of the rest of the Greeks. Next major battle is the Battle of Salamis, which is really the first major naval battle in history. So you have the Persian fleet, which isn't really Persian ships. It's more ships that are sailed by more competent, more seafaring peoples like the Phoenicians, the Egyptians, even other Greek city-states that had defected and had accepted the offer of the Persians. Maybe they feel like they're betting on, or they're making a safer bet by siding with the Persians than with all of the Greeks that have kind of, confederated themselves together. But this fleet of triremes winds up going up to Salamis, and the Battle of Salamis is this pretty classic naval battle where you'd have these triremes. The way that, because it's like, what do you have in terms of artillery? You have archers, but shooting arrows at a boat isn't really going to do anything to it. And so instead, what you have to try to do is angle your boat, your ship, to where it is going to smash into the side of an enemy ship and sink the enemy ship. Even when you sink the enemy ship, the enemies aren't just going to hang out there, right? They're going to be up on the top of the ship ready to jump onto your ship and fight you hand to hand, and whoever wins that hand-to-hand combat is going to control the ship that you steered into the side of their ship. And so it could ultimately be a win, could be a loss. I'd say that there is an advantage for the team that can prepare and kind of hold the line, but they're just smashing ships into each other at the Battle of Salamis. And this is headed up by the Athenian king Themistocles, who leads the combined Greek fleet against all of the nations, the fleet from different places in the Persian Empire, and ultimately gets another victory for the Greeks. And then the last major battle, I should say, in the Greco-Persian Wars is the Battle of Platea. The Battle of Platea is the amassed Persian forces and the amassed Greek forces, Athenians, Spartans, all these other Greek city-states that have amassed themselves against the Persians. And again, they don't attack right away because neither side feels like they have a clear advantage. They start sacrificing to their gods and looking for signs and omens in the ways that the birds are flying, or different goat entrails and things like that, trying to find a sign from the gods when the right time to attack would be. And eventually, a lot of the Greeks wind up deciding, okay, this is not going to be a good place to make a last stand, so we need to leave. However, remember that the Greeks are under the leadership of different commanders. You'd have a commander from each different city-state. And so when the Greeks start to leave, the Persians view this as disorganization and as like a scatter, because they're not all following the exact same guy's orders. So they see this as being a weakness. They charge in. When the Greeks see them charging, they say, okay, it's now or never. Like, we have to make our stand here. And they wind up, engaging in this last combat. And famously, one of the Spartans throws a rock at the head of the Persian general and kills him. And then, they wind up eventually defeating the Persians. Now, if you are King Xerxes, you have a decision to make. Are you going to continue to try to subjugate these Greeks, or are you going to say, like, hey, I can't keep spending all of my money and all of my troops and all of my time and attention on just this one place. So if I kind of back off of the Greeks, then I can hold together the rest of my empire. Add to that the fact that because the Greeks have been successful in pushing back the Persians, the Egyptians revolt again. The Babylonians revolt. Some of the horseback archer people that are over to the eastern part of the empire, they start to revolt. They see weakness in Xerxes and in the fact that, oh, shoot, these Persians can actually be defeated, and they wind up rebelling against the Persian Empire. And so Xerxes says, look, I have other problems. I have bigger fish to fry. I have other things that I have to take care of. I cannot keep investing in this thing that's clearly going to be a loss. And he winds up pulling his troops out of Athens and out of the islands in the Aegean Sea. They do still occupy Ionia for a while, and but they wind up pulling back. And this is significant because if you look at the line between Greece and, let's call it, Turkey today, this pretty much is the line between what we call Eastern and Western civilizations, or at least we call Western civilization everything to the west of Greece. So if you think of Rome, if you think of later the Spanish Empire, the British Empire, this is all west of Greece, and this becomes a major dividing line, I would even say, to today, that there's a pretty major cultural difference between Europe and then the Near East, or the Middle East, what we might call it. And obviously those distinctions are now more rooted in Christianity and in Islam, which are not going to show up for hundreds of years after the Greco-Persian Wars. But again, this is significant. This is the dividing line between the West and the rest of the world. Another issue that we'll talk about more in the next lecture is the Greeks have a decision that they have to make. Are we going to say, okay, we've done enough winning, we have secured our own freedom, and we're fine to just kind of return to the way we were? Or are they going to say, no, we have to still go back and help those Ionians and help the other Greeks that are on mainland Asia Minor, the Anatolian Peninsula? Are we going to help those people to be free? Or are we just going to say, hey, we got our freedom, but you, good luck, or maybe just you'll have to live under your tyrants? And there's a dispute, there's a disagreement. The Athenians, just like in the beginning with the Ionian Revolt, they say, no, this is not right. Greeks should not be living like this. So Athens and her allies are very much like, hey, we need to help them out. And then Sparta is like, hey, we got ours. We did what we came to do. We pushed back the Persians. They're not going to move any further into our backyard. So Sparta and her allies say, no, we just need to accept what we have. We're not going to be the babysitters and the rescuers of every Greek city-state. We're here for ourselves. We need to take care of ourselves. And that dispute winds up turning into another whole other thing. But we'll talk about that in the next lecture. For now, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a blessed day.